Welcome to episode 45 of the Creative Train podcast. This one is about transformation, personal transformation in art and life through creativity. Nice light topic. And this was inspired by two very contrasting conversations with two of my new music students these past few weeks. One of which had the other person taking shots at my integrity and trying to back me into a corner. And another which reminded me why I'm so passionate about sharing my love of music and creativity of all kinds, and how that passion shapes my teaching methods. The gist of it all is that there is a process and you have to understand where you are in it. So let's light some creative fires. All aboard? This brings to mind something I heard some time ago about basically any creative journey or personal journey we start. And it's that transformation is not an event, it's a process. And admittedly, there have been times in my personal, spiritual, and artistic development where I didn't realize or recognize my impatience and frustrations were rooted in that very statement. I was only anticipating what the proverbial finish would look like, and in forgetting to watch my footing on the path, pay attention to the journey, or enjoy the changing vistas each new experience brought to me, I tripped on my ego. I forgot about why I actually started something. I just wanted the result. I forgot about how I need to bring my best to each new project, and not just assume that anything would be good enough. By trying to focus solely on the outcome and getting frustrated and angry with myself, my productivity dropped, my inspirations went unseen and unheard, all because I didn't put myself into what I call teacher mode with myself and remind myself that there is indeed a process. And not everybody gets into any kind of, creative or sports process, if you want to call it that, with the goals of ultimate, personal, spiritual transformation. But part of you does transform when you start to get into these things and you dedicate yourselves to it. You do have personal transformations. And in this, we're talking about personal transformation through art and creativity. So whether you're brand new in a creative pursuit or a seasoned pro, you will notice that part of your mind that holds that ideal version of yourself and your art very dearly and passionate can seem completely delusional when you find yourself staring at your half-started work, wondering if you'll ever have a good idea again. But take a moment to think about who it is exactly that is looking at that ideal. Who is it? It's not the artist in you. It's not the inner kid I once suggested that you reconnect with. None of those. What it is the part of you that wants virtually instant gratification and has lost touch with the joy in the process of any creative pursuit. In one of the early episodes, I explored the topic of why we create, why we feel so inspired sometimes and so debilitated other times. I believe we create because art is fun. Plain and simple, we crave fun. We need to see progress in ourselves and our abilities, and sometimes we just need a brain break at the end of the day to get our minds off of our other life dedicated to earning money, doing something we may or may not like or enjoy. So back to the initial topic of these two conversations I had. The first student was probably about 10 years my senior, not exactly an absolute beginner, but definitely not in a place of confidence in their approach to the guitar. And it's a big, brave step as an adult to seek out what I call it a professional intervention. To admit you could use some help is a big thing as an adult who's long accustomed to being good at certain things already. Apparently, though, she was very well researched on YouTube University. I mean, we all do it. For all the things that a beginner guitar student should, or rather could try to learn on their own. And to her point already, some ground had been covered. Yeah. The rest of our first session revolved around her pointed questions read to me from a notebook, asking me about my understanding of music theory, what the specific eras were in music history, who played what, composed what their most famous works were, and my overall command of the instrument had to be demonstrated. Over and over again, she came at me with something she'd heard about on how to find a qualified instructor. You know, the red flags to look out for. And once I realized that she had very little interest learning things about music from me, I asked her very pointedly, why did you sign up for lessons if you won't even let me speak or demonstrate anything to offer you as a technique to try? Everything I said, you have a counter argument for based on notes you took from some YouTube counselor. I actually did say that. She came back with that she just wanted to make sure that I'm qualified to handle her inspirations. Oh boy. Like what? Am I strong enough to handle your barrage of dismissive comments? Or will I have the wherewithal to comprehend your budding genius? This is all taking place over 30 minutes, remember. So I answered every question she had about technique, theory, songwriting, even musical technology. Why are those little lights moving on my computer? And even got into some music history and some basic piano skills because it was just sitting right there. And at the end of the 30 minutes, she looks at me and she says, I know this wasn't really a lesson, but I'm going to pay you anyway. And I asked her if she learned anything from our first session together. And she replied, oh, yes, I have lots of new information to put to use. To which I replied, then it was an actual lesson. I assured her that music and music teaching is not my hobby. It's how I've paid my bills and done okay at it at times over the last 30-something years. If someone comes to me for in-person lessons or even virtual lessons, they get all of me. They get all of my experience at their beck and call. Not that I know it all, but I've learned a few things over the years. I know how to do stuff. Now, this is now being a few weeks after her first session that I'm writing this, and she has since dropped out, forfeited her lesson spot. And I feel like I did my best to share as much inspiration and information with her as possible, despite the fact that she barely ever stopped talking about her YouTube folks that are more eloquent than I am, or telling me that music theory doesn't matter to her, as she is somehow divinely inspired to create music and it's all just gibberish to her. And I asked her, why are you asking so much about it? Music theory, if you don't want to know it. And she said she was just ticking off boxes to see if I knew my stuff. It didn't really hold any interest for her at all. I was actually quietly, and I hope not visibly relieved, when she said she wasn't going to continue, because our student-teacher relationship was beyond the point of saving, and I had honestly lost interest, as her constant antagonism and zero effort put into trying to apply any of the things I was offering over the 5 weeks she was with me. It was obvious. She came to the sessions armed with talking points, none of which she had any understanding of. She had a closed mind and an always open mouth. In all my time teaching, I've never experienced anything quite like that. The next fella on my new student roster list was very genuinely seeking musical guidance. He was humble in telling me about his first 5 or so years ago trying to learn how to play on his own. He knew what he knew, and he also acknowledged what he didn't know and what his limitations he felt were thus far. And as with every student that I have, regardless of their age, I asked them what they would like to accomplish in our sessions. Where would he like to see himself and his musical ability in, say, 8 weeks? Firstly, he wanted to play some of his wife's favorite songs for her. Nice. He's got a great singing voice. He wanted to be able to understand more about music so that maybe he could get into writing some of his own songs. Even nicer. So after a few minutes of talking back and forth about his inspirations and such, we got into some chords. He knew some, but he didn't know the names of all of them. And there are lots of adult beginners I've worked with in the past who are in much the same situation. And there is no shame in that. You don't know what you don't know. But again, like I said earlier, it's a big step as an adult to put yourself into a situation where you feel vulnerable and somewhat unable, and keep the mindset of wanting to thrive in that environment. When I felt the genuine vibe of honesty and trust coming from him as our conversation continued, now, mind you, this is all within 30 minutes, I started to steer the conversation to what I can and will do for him on his musical journey. And I could visibly notice how he started to physically relax. Not that he seemed anxious or anything before, but his shoulders relaxed. He sat back in the chair a little bit more, and he was smiling the whole time. And we talked about, yes, I can show you this and write this down for you and show you how to do it, but you got to do it yourself. And he goes, oh, no, I totally get that. And he's probably around the same age as me. I'm in my middle 50s right now. But not once did he bring up anything at all that he saw online to challenge my information, my thoughts or perspective on learning, or question my musical abilities. Honestly, this had to be, I felt like I was in a pinball machine for the past hour. It had to be one of those rebounding and mentally challenging hours of my life with two such contrasting people in my studio back to back, one of which had me almost wanting to quit and go find a factory job, and another who brought me right back down to earth and reminded me why exactly I have never felt dread about going to work. And as the weeks have gone on with this fella, we've developed a great relationship, a great rapport, a camaraderie. As I come to understand his learning process, he feels totally comfortable asking me what some might call silly questions, and admits when he doesn't understand something, and I'll try and find another way to explain it or demonstrate it. We celebrate any and all accomplishments. We sing, we improvise lyrics, and make songs out of every theoretical or practical exercise that we do. And it's honestly one of the most joyful 30-minute sessions I have all week. And back to the point about transformation, that it's not an event, it's a process. And when the process is honored by giving it our time and the space it needs to happen, then it happens. When we force our will upon it and demand its course and speed and results and deadlines, then you most certainly assure that the transformation won't happen. And I was talking in this episode about like an interpersonal transformation, but perhaps a transformation that can happen within someone as they start to gain experience and ability in their creative journey. If you expect results, you set yourself up for achieving those results, and you are honest with not only your peers or your instructor or coach or whatever you have, but especially with yourself, then you have created a magical environment full of promise and positivity towards not only achieving those goals, but to do so with joy, ease, and a feeling of glorious satisfaction in your efforts. There's your pep talk. Now go get to work. So the idea of personal transformation through art and creativity, it shapes our attitude towards learning, and it can help shape our attitude towards anything that we do in life. One of the early points that I made in the podcast was that it can enhance your mental agility. Now, for some people, this makes them want to research more into it. And for others, it makes them really want to trust in the process they've got going on. But when you feel that transformation happen in you, you notice that your abilities change, your perspectives change, your satisfaction is there, and you're doing it. Doesn't matter where you are. There's a process. Just honor where you are in it.